This episode begins with baby Groot's birth on a spaceship. We see how he's being groomed by two robot assistants. One day he's eating cheese puffs when he suddenly realizes that he's grown too big for his vase, causing it to crack. Groot is then immediately put aside and replaced with a much bigger plant known as a bonsai plant. This of course upsets Groot. With time, Groot gets neglected by the robots and even has his blanket taken away from him when he's cold. He throws a tantrum and then tosses a weird fruit at his now rival, which immediately backfires, knocking him off the table, but then he realizes he has a special ability of being able to stretch his limbs, which saves him from crashing to the floor. He climbs back up and tries to attack the bonsai plant with his newly found abilities, but he doesn't seem to have gotten the hang of it. Groot notices the plant wobbling and assumes it has to be mocking him for his incompetence. This time he reaches for the ceilings and swings himself towards the bonsai plant but fails to stick the landing. He starts to punch the plant but ends up getting a splinter. Then he tries to spin the plant around but gets knocked down. He then grabs the branch of the plant and snaps it in half but is unable to detach it because of some elastic jelly-like substance inside the plant. Groot then somehow manages to wrap himself around it, but is unable to hold the force that slaps him back to the plant, causing the both of them to fall off the table and onto the floor. Both lose their vases in the process. Luckily for Groot, he realizes he has legs but fails miserably in his first attempt to use them. He starts by crawling, then with a few more wobbly steps he finally gets the hang of it. Groot is now running around the ship but stops at the bonsai plant that is still on the floor to gloat. He then realizes he's being a jerk and decides to befriend the bonsai plant. Later, we see Groot sitting beside the plant while sharing some cheese puffs with it. One of the robots comes in to clean off the cheese puffs, but Groot punches it away and goes back to enjoying the view from their spaceship. Groot, whose spaceship is parked on a different planet. Groot is seen climbing up a rock where he plays with a few sticks before getting the idea to build something. 5 minutes later, Groot is done building a tower, which soon gets invaded by an unsuspecting creature. He tries to fend it off, but gets scared and abandons the tower instead. Suddenly, a Velu swoops in and snatches the creature, taking down Groot's tower in the process. Groot gets so mad that he yells out his frustration for 37 minutes straight, until he drops to the ground. While lying on the ground, he sees a stone and lifts it up to find a miniature ground civilization. The tiny blue creatures, who seem to be fighting over lack of food, see Groot and immediately feel intimidated. Groot then introduces himself, but his little movement causes a heavy win for the civilization. Groot then decides to transfer his anger of being bullied to the little creature, making them perceive him as a threat. They start attacking with stones, which hit Groot like it's nothing. So Groot retaliates by blowing some air into their home. He seems to be enjoying tormenting them. Well, not until the creatures take out their guns and begin to shoot lasers at Groot. They attack Groot in large numbers, firing lasers at him continuously until he's down on the floor. During the attack, a leaf pops off from Groot's rear and lands in the creature's home, and this turns out to be nothing but food for the civilization, which can be seen rejoicing and taking shares. Groot then rushes to get them more leaves, but on returning he steps on all of them. Feeling awkward about the situation, he drops the leaves and places the stone back on them, then runs away. Then a while later, the creatures pop out of the sand one by one, indicating they are still alive. We are back on the spaceship with Groot, who wakes up to loud clanging noises. He angrily steps out to check out where the sound could be coming from but is unable to see anything. He then goes to a box full of gadgets and grabs a smartwatch, which he straps around his head, and then turns on the flashlight. He notices a broken canister on the floor and some rainbow-colored liquid spilling around. He hears water dripping up ahead and barges there to check, only to see that it's just a toilet. He, however, uses the toilet before continuing his search around the ship. He investigates a shelf where he thought he heard some noise, but still fails to find whatever is making the sound. He then follows the sound to a place with fruits on the ground. While investigating that region, his light goes out and he's unable to turn it back on. Just then, Groot hears an explosion just ahead of him. The damage on the ship is so massive that Groot realizes he's definitely not chasing something small. He walks through the hole and starts to look around until he finds the colored liquid on the floor. He turns around to see that it is from Lua, a semi-fluid flubber shaped like Groot. The flubber introduces himself as Groot, which gets Groot mad because he believes he's the only Groot. They both argue about who Groot is, so Groot challenges the creature to a dance-off. The flubber follows Groot's very move, and suddenly they're dancing together, with the flubber correcting Groot's moves. Groot pays listening ears, so the flubber starts giving Groot tips on how to pull off the dance moves. Groot follows his advice and starts to dance with the flubber, but has something else in mind. Groot, however, leads the flubber to a part of the ship's quadrant that acts as an ejection zone, sending him back into space. There can be only one Groot. Groot then continues dancing salsa in his own way. Groot on yet another planet full of green and nature. He finds a puddle and dips a stick into it to taste the mud. After realizing that the puddle is safe for him, he tosses the stick away, tests the water with his right foot, and then slowly descends into the puddle. He captures a glowing bug flying past and squeezes some glow content into the puddle, which beautifies the color of the water. Afterward, he adds some strange-looking berries that begin to sizzle in the water, creating steam like fog. He applies some mud to his head and then to his arms, grabs some other fruit looking like a slice of a cucumber, and covers his eyes with them. After all that, Groot has successfully made himself a jacuzzi in the wild. Happy with his performance, he screams out, "I am Groot!" which echoes around the forest and also displeases a colorful squirrel-like creature. Groot, on the other hand, relaxes and slowly slips away, only to wake up with a head full of leaves. He sees his reflection in the water and gets freaked out as he rushes out of the water. However, he also had leaves all over his body and he now looks like a miniature flower bush. He then walks up to a reflective surface where he realizes that he actually looks cool with all the fresh leaves. So he proceeds to groom himself. After his first grooming, he appears to be in a snow outfit. Suddenly, the leaves all dry out and begin to fall off. Groot panics and rushes back to the puddle to get more mud on himself. The mud causes more fresh leaves to grow on his head, making him look like a tree for a moment before the leaves dry off again. Once more, he returns to the puddle and this time grooms himself to look like a dolphin, all while disturbing the squirrel's peace. He tries one more time again and appears to be a muscular man with a beard. The squirrel grunts in frustration, while Groot tries another look, a centaur. And finally, Groot tries on a princess look, which further agitates the squirrel into attacking him while he's busy pirouetting. The squirrel watches as Groot's supposed hair falls off and laughs so hard that Groot gets sad and then angry. He rushes back to the pond to get more mud. At first, he doesn't realize that it is all dried up and just pours sand on himself, but the sand gets in his eyes, making him realize that his precious puddle is gone. He gets sad as he watches the last leaf fall off his head. He then starts to mourn his sadness, when suddenly, the squirrel starts to laugh at him again. Groot then smiles sheepishly, and the next thing we see is Groot striding off with colorful fur around his neck and so much joy in him. Meanwhile, the squirrel is left furless and shivering as he watches Groot head to his ship. Groot's pulling a backpack that belonged to Peter Quill. After settling down, he takes out a Marvel's Real Alf comic book from 1988. He then gets the idea to draw a family painting on it, so his quest for fine art begins. He starts by stealing some fur from Rocket's tail, he steals a processing chip from the ship, and then sneaks up on Drax while he's in the shower and steals his soap. He fails in his first attempt because the soap is obviously slippery. Instead, he decides to surf with it. A while later, Groot is seen with a whole lot of stuff he has gathered. He bumps into the wall and drops a fuel rod, but doesn't realize it. He takes all the things to a table and cracks his finger, ready to begin his art. He starts by wiping off the drawing on the paper and applying some glue onto which he sticks Rocket's fur. He then uses the soap to make his sketch, and finally, he uses Peter's boot, which has a rocket propeller at the back, as we see his little art coming to life. Suddenly, he gets the idea to use glitter, but since he doesn't have any, he decides to make some. This leads Groot to attach a bomb to the processing chip, which then creates an explosion, thus making glitter rain. He then quickly rushes back to catch the glitter on his painting. While doing that, he almost falls through a hole caused by the extreme explosion. He then goes around it and tries to fix it with some duct tape. Meanwhile, Rocket is on his way toward the room, which is emitting a lot of smoke. He gets worried and starts calling out to Groot when he realizes that Groot is just sitting by the hole. Rocket then realizes the ship's fuel rods are just lying on the floor. He also realizes that the walls are wet and simultaneously on fire. Then he perceives Drax's soap and picks it up, telling Groot that Drax has been looking for it everywhere. Suddenly he notices that the room looks like a bomb went off, so he asks Groot about it, and Groot doesn't deny that he's guilty. Rocket then gets angry and starts to yell, but Groot hands him the painting. Rocket then puts on his spectacles, hoping it is an apology letter, but is surprised to see this painting. He commends Groot for his hard work by offering to get it framed and placed it on the fridge. He then admits that he can't stay mad at Groot, and Groot scurries off using Drax's soap as a skateboard. Just then Rocket realizes that Groot has done his painting using his tail hair, but as he questions Groot about it, suddenly another explosion occurs from the hole, sucking in everything close to its vicinity, including Rocket. Rocket then calls out to Groot, who stretches his limbs and grabs Rocket out and away from the suction. A while later, Groot's painting is seen floating around in space alongside a fuel rod, and everything Groot had gathered for the painting. The end. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.